November 1904. The plane was shrouded in an eerie gray dawn mist when I first saw them. Gleaming steel tubes set upon humble wooden wheels, their carriages sunk into the mud of Manchuria's frozen soil. The wind carried the distant thump of earth being torn apart, the anguished cries of men, and over it all, the impatient snorts of horseflesh. At first glance they appeared unremarkable. Smaller, lighter, almost fragile next to the massive Russian siege pieces that loomed across no man's land. Yet, these guns, the so-called Type 3175I unreefed quick-firing pieces, would become silent protagonists in the most epic struggle of early modern warfare. They were scarcely impressive by the standards of Western ordnance designers, but what they lacked in brute weight they more than compensated for in cunning engineering, adaptability, and strategic surprise. In the coming months and years, I would come to understand these artifacts not merely as weapons, but as embodiments of a nation's tactical ingenuity and industrial evolution, and as instruments that quietly outsmarted the very modern armies that sought to ignore them. I first encountered the whispered name, Sanjuishin Shiki, on the cracked lips of a Japanese artillery captain, his voice gravelly from months in the field. Translated roughly, it meant Type 31, marking the 31st year of Emperor Meiji's reign, 1898, the year these guns were born from the minds of Japanese designers. But behind that sterile designation lay a story of urgency and innovation. At the turn of the century, Japan stood at a crossroads. It was a rising military power, its modernizing industries still in their infancy compared to the steel forges of Europe and the United States. Chief among its challenges was how to arm a disciplined, ambitious army with the firepower demanded by the great battles looming on the horizon. Traditional bronze, barreled guns, sturdy, familiar, lacked the range and accuracy needed against foes that still employed the latest Krupp and Schneider systems. In the new age of smokeless powder, recoil management, and rapid-fire mechanisms, Japan needed a weapon that could match the best without compromising on mobility or field-use practicality. If you love this story and want more history that shocks, inspires, and motivates, subscribe to Rising Warfare, like this video, and explore the incredible tales we uncover. More amazing content is coming, and trust me, you don't want to miss it! Into this void stepped Colonel Arisaka Nariakira, a man whose name would long be whispered in arsenals and barracks from Osaka to Port Arthur. He and his team dared to rethink what a mountain gun could be. The result was the Type 31, a 75mm quick-firing gun whose genius lay not in its raw power, but in the clever packaging of evolving technologies: smokeless powder, a steel barrel, and a recoil system unprecedented in Japanese artillery. The first time I laid eyes on its sleek, steel-forged barrel, I was struck by the contrast with the bronze relics it replaced. Bronze had served the Japanese army well as recently as the First Sino-Japanese War, but it lacked the tensile strength and heat resilience afforded by the new steel barrels of the late 19th century. With its 75mm bore and smooth lines, the Type 31 promised not only improved durability but heightened accuracy. A vital boon on the sprawling fields of Manchuria. The gun weighed roughly 330 kg in its mountain variant, making it light enough to be dismantled into pack loads and carried by mules or soldiers in terrain impassable to traditional horse teams. It could be pulled by a single horse, though in practice 2 or 3 were often used to negotiate the rugged tracks leading to observation posts high above battle lines. Its semi-rigid recoil system was ingenious in its simplicity, a network of cables and springs that absorbed the gun's backward shutter upon firing, then tugged it back into place for the next round. It was no hydro-pneumatic marvel, but it allowed crews to fire repeatedly without the protracted repositioning required by rigid mount competitors. The rate of fire, roughly 2 to 3 rounds per minute, may seem slow by later First World War standards, yet for its era this was respectable, especially given the logistical efficiency of its fixed ammunition cartridges. With a muzzle velocity of approximately 487 nebs and a shell weight of around 6 kg, it could reach out to roughly 800 meters in its field configuration, a range sufficient to contest Russian positions on the lofty high plains. Yet despite these specifications, what truly made the Type 31 remarkable was not just the sum of its metal parts. It was how, in the crucible of war, men learned to use it. In the bitter winter of 1904, during the siege of Port Arthur, Japanese artillery units, like the one I observed, were ordered forward into positions carved from rocky outcrops and wind-blasted hills. There, these guns would flat out perform tasks for which they had never been designed, acting as direct fire support, counter-battery weapons, and even improvised anti-fortification platforms. They crept forward with the infantry, their wooden wheels sinking into mud one day and crunching over frost heaves the next. And in the face of Russian steel, men learned to squeeze every ounce of advantage from the Type 31's surprising versatility. I remember one winter morning, standing with a Japanese lieutenant beside his team as they prepared to fire. Frost clung to the earthen breastwork, spiders of cracked ice webbing the carriage wheels. The lieutenant's breath curled in the air. This gun, he told me, was not built to match the biggest Russian guns in a toe contest. We use it to control terrain, to support our infantry, and to frighten the enemy into mistakes. And indeed, there were moments when the psychological impact of these relatively light guns was disproportionately large. Russian positions, confident in their heavier artillery, were forced to reckon with Japanese guns that could be repositioned with astonishing speed, firing not just shrapnel and high explosive, but smokeless powder rounds that denied the enemy the comforting clouds of smoke that betrayed their aim. From that siege to the broader campaigns across Manchuria, from the frozen steppes to the steamy valleys where infantry units pressed forward, the Type 31 became more than a tool of war. It became an extension of Japan's tactical imagination, where a heavy Krupp piece might require teams of horses and hours of preparation just to shift a few dozen meters. These mountain guns could be packed up, broken into manageable loads, and moved on footpaths where no wagon could venture. But the narrative of the Type 31 does not end with the guns themselves. Its legacy is woven through the strange tapestry of early 20th century conflicts across continents. Several decades after their first baptism of fire, hundreds of these guns, once symbols of Japanese ingenuity, found their way into foreign arsenals. In the desperate artillery shortages of World War I, Japan sold roughly 100 Type 31 pieces to the Russian Empire in 1916. With the storms of revolution erupting soon after in Russia, many of these guns passed into the hands of the emergent Red Army. By the end of the Finnish Civil War, Finnish forces had appropriated 44 of the captured guns, designating them 75 VK-98 and deploying them in their own theater of brutal, bitterly cold combat. Yet even there, in the forests and lakes of the north, the Type 31's limitations were as evident as its strengths. Its shorter range at high latitudes and its primitive recoil system paled beside the more modern artillery pieces emerging in Europe. Still, in the hands of determined crews, it held its own, a stubborn reminder that ingenuity can compensate for obsolescence, at least temporarily. In 1937, these Finnish guns, fully 40 years after their original manufacture, were sold yet again, this time bound for Republican Spain, amid the horrors of the Spanish Civil War, loaded aboard the chartered transport Yorbrook with tens of thousands of shells. Intercepted in the Bay of Biscay by the Spanish cruiser Canarias, just before the Battle of Cape Machaco, their final fate remains shrouded in mystery. Were they dumped at sea to prevent capture? Or offloaded in Bermeo's battered harbor? To this day, historians debate their final chapter. Back in Japan, the Type 31 continued to serve long after its prime. As newer guns like the Type 38 and, later, the advanced Type 94-75 mm mountain gun entered service with better range, recoil systems, and firing rates, The old Type 31 was steadily relegated to reserve units, training roles, and colonial garrisons. By the end of World War II, it was a relic, yet still present in stockpiles across Asia, where occupation forces would encounter them for the last time during the post-surrender occupation of Korea. What, then, was the true impact of this unassuming gun? In a historical landscape dominated by great battleships, dreadnoughts, and titanic artillery duels, the Type 31 represents something subtler. The triumph of adaptation over brute strength, of logistical ingenuity over industrial volume. It was not the most powerful gun on any battlefield, but time and again it proved that a well-designed weapon, matched with astute doctrine, could punch above its weight. In its long twilight years, serving in conflicts far from its original birthplaces and under flags that its designers could scarcely have imagined, the Type 31 became a testament to the unpredictable journeys of military technology. It outlived empires, crossed continents, fired in wars as different as the Russo-Japanese front and the Spanish civil struggle, carrying with it fragments of human history at every traverse of its barrel. In truth, it was never really a cheap weapon, not in terms of its design, its service, or its legacy. It was inexpensive only in comparison to the gargantuan systems of Europe, but in the context of Japan's circumstances at the dawn of the 20th century, it was a masterstroke of engineering. A gun that bridged eras, continents, and generations. A weapon that reminded every commander who witnessed it that cunning can be as decisive as caliber. And so when I think back to that murky Manchurian dawn, the chill in the air, the low rumble of distant artillery, and the steely glint of these compact guns standing alert in their emplacements, I realize this victory in war has never belonged solely to the biggest or the loudest. Sometimes, it belongs to the weapon the world overlooks, until it outsmarts them all.